I mean, there must have been something good about this year. Hi, welcome. Come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through all of the books that were the best book of every month in 2020 that I read. Over the year, I read 113 books, which is one of the biggest amount of books that I've read in a year. That gave me quite a lot of books that I could choose from. So I have taken a look at every month and picked the top books that I read in each month. It might not have been a 5-star book, but it is the best of the bunch from that month. So the book of the month for January for me was American Royals by Katharine McGee. I read this pretty early into the year, actually. I think it was like the 4th or 5th book that I read in 2020. I went into it with absolutely no expectations whatsoever. I just knew that it was kind of like The Crown crossed with Gossip Girl, with loads of like drama and all that kind of thing, and I absolutely adored it. I remember going to a cafe. Hey, remember cafes? Like an hour before I had a book club meeting that evening, and I just sat back, had a cup of coffee, and finished that in one go. I absolutely loved this. I do have the sequel, which came out in September, but I haven't read it yet, and hopefully that was going to be on the cards for 2021. The best book that I read in February is, again, another YA book, and it was Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. I really enjoyed this one, and I think one of the reasons that I enjoyed it the most is that it is so big on like family vibes. There's like 3 generations of one family being shown. You've got grandparents, parents, and grandkids. And I also really loved the food aspect of it, because I love reading books that feature food or have recipes or have like chefs, that kind of a thing in it. So that definitely made me really love the story between Pepper and Jack. It also had like a kind of enemies to lovers story, and I don't love those, but I really like them when they're done well, and it was really done well here. I'm going away from YA for a little bit, but book of the month in March for me was Our Little Cruelties by Liz Nugent. I read quite a lot of Irish authors in March because March is the month of St. Patrick's Day, so it felt right to do that. And also, I took part in the Irish Readathon, where the aim of it is to read as many Irish authors as you can. And I love a thriller where you cannot see what's coming at the end. So there's 3 brothers, and the very first line of the book is that there are 3 brothers, and one of them is in the coffin. And you do not know which one of them is in the coffin, how he has died, all of that kind of thing. So you're going through this journey on the book to find out what happened, how it got to the start of the book, what kind of relationship that they have with each other. And it is quite fraught, but I had absolutely no idea. Going throughout the whole book, I had absolutely no idea which one of the brothers was dead, how he had died, the relationships that he had between his brothers. I really loved this one. I actually sent it on to my dad. I think I gave him it as a recommendation rather than gave him the book, and he loved it as well. So you know that that is the sign of a good book. It was another Irish author that was my book of the month in April, and that was Grown Ups by Marian Keyes. I absolutely worship the ground that Marian walks on. I would read any book of hers, and any book of hers that I've read so far, I've absolutely loved. This one is really up there. I love a good family drama, and this delivered it in spades. So you've got the Casey family and all of the like married-ins and the kids and the grandkids, and I really loved that whole kind of togetherness, but kind of forced togetherness. And there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on with this family. Like, you've got a person who's suffering from an eating disorder, you've got affairs, you have got kind of relationships that shouldn't be happening, you've got kids who are trying to focus on school and what they're going to do after they finish school. I really enjoyed this one. It's probably one of my favorite Marian books so far, and I have read, I think, 4 or 5 Marian books so far. This is probably one of my favorites. The book of the month for me in May is another one that I went into with absolutely no expectations whatsoever. I think I barely even knew what the plot was about, and it's one that I've mentioned here maybe 10 or 11 times since, and it is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I hadn't read a whole lot of steamy romance before I got to this book, and the story of Olive and Ethan going off on their siblings' honeymoon because they couldn't go on it just sucked me in so much. I really loved the steamy scenes. Like, the massage scene is one that I'm not going to be able to forget for quite some time. I also really loved that they had a very powerful enemies to lovers, friendship, relationship kind of a thing going on, and that was such a good aspect to this book. It really cemented Christine Lauren as one of my favorite authors, and I had only read one of their books by then. The book of the month for June was Becoming by Michelle Obama, and I had so many other candidates for June, but I absolutely adored Becoming. I listened to it as an audiobook, and I knew that this was the way I wanted to listen to it. I knew that this was how I wanted to read the book, because I feel like when you're reading a celebrity memoir, it's really great to have them actually tell you the story, because I like sitting down with them and feeling like I'm interviewing them, or I'm at a restaurant with them, or they're at my house and they're just telling me the story of their life. I loved this book. There was so much to love about it. I loved the story of how she and Barack met. I loved reading about how they acted on the nights of the elections and the debates and all that. I really, really enjoyed this book so much, and it is one that I have recommended to the most people this year. Book of the month for July was a kind of a new venture for me, because I hadn't read a whole lot of fiction in verse until I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. So this is a fictionalized retelling of an actual plane crash that happened in November 2001 of a plane that left New York for the Dominican Republic. And I felt like this was a really great way to connect with that story, because I had already known about that plane crash. I knew some things about it, and seeing like the aftermath of what had happened, seeing how families reacted to it, how they came together, what it was like for the families who had somebody who didn't survive that plane crash. It was genuinely so heartbreaking to read. I also really loved when Camino and Yahira get to know each other and catch up on like 16, 17 years of just not having any relationship together and forging that relationship together. There's also quite a lot of familial love in this book. There's an LGBT rep, which I was really, really impressed with, and it was done so well. If you haven't read a book in verse yet, this is definitely the one to start with. For me, the book of the month in August is one that's actually not out yet. It's going to come out in February in ebook and in May in paperback. And it is Before I Saw You by Emily Houghton. So this is the story of Alice and of Alfie, who are both in like a rehabilitation center for burn victims, for people who've been in accidents, for people who are trying to like rebuild their lives and relearn how to walk, how to eat, all that kind of a thing. So Alice has been in a fire in her old job, and Alfie has been in an accident where he's lost his leg. Alice doesn't want anybody to see her. She's really ashamed of how she looks, and she keeps this curtain around her bed closed all the time. Seeing them forge a relationship when they have never seen each other, when they barely speak at the start, it was so heartwarming to see. It was so heartwarming to see Alice come out of her shell and start to trust the people in the ward a bit more. Also, there was such a great camaraderie between everybody in the ward. Like there was old, young, male, female, black, white, any kind of people that you can think of were in that ward. And it was so great to see them like come together and try to get everybody through this really horrific part of their lives that they all wish they weren't going through, that they all have to go through. And they're all kind of behind each other when they're going for physical therapy, or they're all behind each other when they're just lying in bed and they're having these moments of, I don't know how I can go on. I don't know how to keep going throughout all of this. Seeing that when everybody came together to support each other, that was really heartwarming to see. And I had been going through a kind of a tough phase in August, but that book really brought me back around. The book of the month for me in September was one of the firsts for me in that it was a rom-com written by a male perspective. And that was The Flip Side by James Bailey. I had genuinely not read a book which was a rom-com from a male perspective before, and I absolutely loved that one. Josh proposes to his girlfriend on New Year's Eve, and she turns him down. So he decides to kind of take life by chance, and he leaves every single decision up to the flip of a coin. So what time he's going to get up for work, what he's going to have for dinner that day, what he's going to wear, everything is decided by the flip of a coin. And the coin takes him on so many journeys. It takes him on like really weird dates. It takes him to galleries that he never thought he would have. It takes him to corners of Europe that he thought he would never have explored. That little bit of exploration of Europe from my chair when I couldn't leave the house, that was genuinely one of the highlights of the book for me. I love a book that's set in Ireland, and I love a book that I can connect with because it's set in Ireland. So that is very likely the reason why the book of the month for October for me was The Falling in Love montage by Kira Smith. So I did really like the characters. There were a couple of moments where I didn't agree with everything that Saoirse had done, and there were a couple of moments where I didn't really enjoy her dad quite a lot. That said, I really, really loved this book. I love when you can connect to a book because you've been through the experiences that the characters are going through. You've done the things that they're doing. Like, I have done my leaving cert. I have sat those exams. I know the kind of stress that you're going through. I know what the summer is like when you're waiting for your results and you're waiting to see if you're going to get into your first choice of university. I absolutely adored that book, and I think everybody will connect to this story of first love. It's so, so heartwarming. The book of the month for me in November was another very, very steamy romance, and it is definitely one that I do not recommend you read in a crowd, if crowds are ever allowed again, because my God, I was in a very uncomfortable position reading it. That book was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. It was the first book of Sally's that I've read. I think it was the first book that she had written, and I absolutely adored it. I did have a little bit of a struggle with it at the start because I wasn't sure where, when, how this was all taking place. And sometimes enemies to lovers, if it's really, really overdone, I can get a little bit, okay, let's speed this up a bit. It got to around 20-25% and I was hooked. I could not get up that book. I adored the relationship between Lucy and Josh, and I know that there is a film in post-production right now. I don't know if it's coming out in 21 or 22, but as soon as it comes out, I'm going to be going to see that. Final book of the month for me in 2020 was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. I had seen that this book was as an audiobook on Spotify, and I thought that that would be a really great way to listen to it. I know there are quite a lot of multimedia things in it, like there's a lot of text, there's a lot of stuff like that. And I feel like if there are texts and stuff like that in a book, it's a lot easier to read it rather than to listen to it. But that was all done really well through the audiobook. I really liked the narrator style. I loved the storyline. I really loved the relationship between Liz and Mac. I really loved that experience of a prom because I lived in Ireland when I was 18 and I didn't have that experience of prom. We had the Debs, which wasn't as big. But prom was so big in this book. There was also family love in this book. There was sickle cell anemia representation, which I have never seen in a book, and it actually made me go and learn more about it, which I love in a book if it gives you that drive to go out and find out what else is happening in the world. I absolutely loved that book, and I cannot wait to see where Leah Johnson goes next. Those were all of the books that I loved every month in 2020. Hopefully 2021 is going to bring just as good a reading year for me. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.